It's spooky season. And you know what that means. Horror. Classic horror specifically. In the month of October, I'm going to be reading 10 classic horror books that I've never read before. In this video, I'm going to tell you all 10 of the titles that I'm going to be reading in October in the order that I'm going to be reading them in. My plan is to read and review each one of them, so if you're interested in any of them, you can read along. In fact, I would like that quite a lot. The majority of these books were written in the 1800s, so what's really going to be interesting to me is to see if they hold up by modern day standards. That list of the 10 classic horrors that I'm going to be reading begins with The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde. How's that for a cover? Pretty nice looking, eh? So this is a pretty famous story, right? Doctor / professor / scientist comes up with a concoction that he can drink, and it transforms him into a beastly version of himself. That's going to be the first book. And the good thing about this book is that it's really short. A lot of these books are going to be really short, so it's not going to be like a massive investment. I think I'll probably be able to read this one in a day, you know, maybe an afternoon, or maybe over the course of a couple of days. Should be pretty manageable, I would say. Next up in the books that I'm going to be reading for spooky season is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This is a ghost story about a governess that's looking after two children. I believe they're orphans, could be wrong about that, but she's looking after two children in a state that she believes is haunted by previous employees that used to work there. This was written, I think, in 1898 this one was written. And again, nice short one. My thinking is that if I start with a couple of short ones, I can start to build momentum. And there are actually a few short stories. That's how I'm going to be able to read 10 books in the month of October, just relying on short stories. It's not cheating. It's not cheating. It's not, don't. All right, anyway. Next up is maybe the king of classic horror. Can you guess what it is? If you had to guess, what is the king of classic horror? Thought of it? Was it Dracula by Bram Stoker? If it wasn't, you were wrong. So yeah, another character that is very famous in popular fiction. I've probably seen about 5 or 6 movies with Dracula in it. This was written originally in 1897. Eastern European daddy of vampires takes a trip to London is effectively what I think this story is about. So yeah, this will be pretty good. And again, I normally go for the paperbacks, but for a lot of this classic horror, it just felt more appropriate to go for the hardback covers. By the way, I've just noticed, look at that gold trim of the pages. Look at that. Oh, this is luxurious. This is lavish. I've really treated myself with this. Read this by candlelight. Oh, yes. Yes. Let me take a look at this. All right, Dracula, number 3. Next up is The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers. This was written in 1895, and I know a lot of you are probably going to see this title, and you might say, oh, that's not classic horror, that's cosmic horror, that's cheating. Listen, fair point. Fair point, it is cosmic horror, and I am being a little bit broad in my definition of what is classic horror. I'm trying to stick to it as best as I can. I wanted to read The King in Yellow, and you know, you're allowed just to let me have some fun. If you wanted to, you could just say, oh, I'm just going to let him have some fun and I'm not going to judge him. He's put up all these little lovely lights in the background for me, bless him. Just let him have some fun. Thank you. Just quickly what this book is about, if you don't already know. It's cosmic horror. It was a big inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft. It's a collection of short stories, even though it is quite short in itself. There's short stories contained within. I believe it's about 7 or 8 short stories, and they all center around a mysterious, kind of unknowable figure called The King in Yellow. I think there are, towards the end of the book, apparently, some of the short stories aren't really relevant, and so maybe I'll skim past those and just focus on the spooky stories. There's some romance elements at the end, which aren't really connected for some reason, bit strange, but overall this book is supposed to be very unsettling, and again, it's a big inspiration for Lovecraftian horror, what became Lovecraftian horror. The next book I'll be reading for spooky season is The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. I believe this was written in 1839, so the oldest one yet. This is a gothic story about two siblings. I believe their names are Roderick and Madeline Usher, and they have been infected with a mysterious illness, and we, as the reader, witness their mental and physical decay. It's very atmospheric writing, apparently, and it's just very macabre, which is what I would expect from Edgar Allan Poe. So yeah, really looking forward to this one, the oldest one that we've spoken about so far, but I think there is one that's even older than this. And actually, that's the one that we're going to talk about next. Now, I'm going to let you guess again. If Dracula was not the master of all classic horror, then who would be? If it wasn't Dracula, who would it be next? Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And I believe this is written in 1818. Again, this is a very famous story about Dr. Victor Frankenstein, who creates new life out of the bodies of corpses. And I think it's supposedly quite a philosophical book about a man's desire to control life, the essence of life itself, to not have to pay for consequences, and to not have to mourn for the people that he loves. He just wants to control, just slow everything down, stop everything from happening, and pays the consequences for that. But yeah, really looking forward to reading this one. And this will be the oldest one that we'll be reading. 1818! Okay, next up, I think we're on number 7 now, that I'll be reading for October, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This was written in 1890, so another book written in the 1800s. And again, this is another occasion where I'm playing pretty fast and loose with the concept of classic horror. This would definitely be seen more as gothic fiction, but I just really wanted to read it. You know, I was looking for an excuse to read some Oscar Wilde, so yeah, why not dive into this? There are horror elements, but it's basically about a young, very beautiful man who's living a life of vanity and pure decadence, and he doesn't want time to age him. He's, like I say, he's very vain, and so he makes a deal where he will stay forever young, but the painting of him will age in his place. And meant to be very spooky, very eerie, and I can't wait to dive into it. Okay, so number 8 that I'll be reading in October for spooky season is Halloween Party by Agatha Christie, written in 1969. Bit of a newbie. This one's for the kids. This is a murder mystery with Hercule Poirot, and this is one of the more modern books that I'll be reading. There's actually a movie that's been based on this book that was released this year called A Haunting in Venice. So if you've seen that movie, then you'll know what this book is about. I haven't seen the movie yet. I want to, therefore I want to read the book first, and then I get to enjoy the movie. I always like to do it that way rather than the other way around. Next up is The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft, and it was written in 1928. So yeah, more cosmic horror. I believe that this story, and this is a lovely little short thing that I'll definitely fly through in just like maybe an hour or two. I believe it's a story about a young man who uncovers a secret cult that worships alien entities. Cthulhu is H.P. Lovecraft's arguably his most famous monster, and so this is going to be fantastic to read. I've hardly read any H.P. Lovecraft, honestly. I'm really looking forward to diving into more H.P. Lovecraft next year. So I've actually got his complete collection outside of this. So I'm probably going to read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft and review a lot of that. That's if I enjoy this one. If I read this and I go, oh no, I don't know, then maybe that plan will change. That brings us on to the final book that I'll be reading for spooky season, and that is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And again, it's another hardcover. Oh, this came out in 1959, I think. Another hardcover, really nice artwork. This is the story of Eleanor Vance, who is like a kind of a shy woman, and she is invited by Dr. Montague. He invites her and some other people to Hill House to scientifically prove the existence of ghosts. So those are the 10 books that I'm going to be reading and reviewing in the month of October. I hope that you'll join me in the journey, and if you'd like to see my review of the first book, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde, then you can click up here where I'm going to talk about the book. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Happy reading and happy Halloween!